1. This happened about a year and a half ago. Names have been changed. I used to work in a gas station where this one particular customer was a regular. Throughout interactions with this guy, I figured out there was something off about the way he socialized. This guy could ramble for minutes and minutes and minutes at a time, until you told him you had to serve someone else. Even if there was a queue, he would still ramble. I was a new girl at the station, and everyone told me they avoided serving him because he made them uncomfortable. Yet they never trespassed him or asked him to leave. Let's call him Tom. Tom was in his mid-40s and ran some kind of unregistered, probably somewhat illegal, lawn mowing company, where he would mow lawns for people and they would pay him cash. I feel sorry for his customers because I really wouldn't want this guy on my property or knowing where I lived. It started off relatively harmless, but harmless always gets freaking tiring. So he used to comment on my smile, how he liked the shape of my face and mouth, weirdo. He also used to comment on my hair, which I used to dye red. It's actually part of the reason I stopped dyeing it. He even stroked it a few times. I told my site leader that I thought he was weird and he was always commenting on my looks, and I was getting sick of it now. She literally said, "Well, none of us kiss his ass, so he leaves us alone now." That really pissed me off because I never kissed his ass. Only politely served him and asked him not to behave certain ways. Secondly, he never left them alone. They used to run into the back room and make me serve him. One day, my coworker had a heart attack and died suddenly, not at work. I was really upset because he was practically the only nice coworker towards me. There were a lot of bitchy women working at this station who talked about me and made fun of me behind my back, though I was constantly doing their work and pulling double-plus shifts regularly. This worker was a really wonderful older guy, pushing me to talk to my boss about becoming a manager. Naturally, I was upset and I cried a couple of times in my shift. But once I was alone for the night, I had to hold myself together for the customers. Tom came in. It was around 8 or 9 p.m., and we have a policy called controlled door. Basically, we unlock the door for anyone who we think won't rob us. After 10 p.m., no customers are allowed in. So yeah, Tom is buying 2 bottles of Coke or something. I let him in because I wasn't that threatened by him at this point, and I was a bit off during that shift since my coworker had just died that day. He approaches the counter and mentions that I look sick or upset, and how he heard that so-and-so passed away. I just said yes, and said I was feeling a bit sad. Without warning, he grabbed me by the neck and pulled me across the counter into an awkward and painful hug because my legs were hanging mid-air. I didn't say anything because I was literally so taken aback and frankly scared. Tom then said, "I noticed you had the door locked, and then you unlocked it for me. That must mean you trust me." I just made some excuse about how I needed to clean the coffee machine now, and he needs to leave so I can monitor the cameras. The way he had grabbed me left a sore pain in my neck for literal weeks. The next few days, I told my site leader what happened, and she told me in a snarky way that I should have made an incident report the night it happened. I told her I forgot because I was shaken up. She said she would get him trespassed. A couple of nights when I was leaving around 10 p.m., he would be outside, around the corner of the building and offering to take me home. I always refused and quickly got to my ride. I told my site leader this, and asked when the trespass was happening, and she said she was discussing it with her boss. A few more creepy comments and occurrences happened when people finally started asking him to leave. By this point, everyone was aware of his behavior towards me and were actively telling him to leave. I got fed up and handed in my resignation, since he hadn't been officially trespassed. It took me handing in my resignation for them on that day to go to the police, and then have a sit-down with me, and they tried to convince me not to leave. I said my mind was made up. My co-workers were mean people, and this guy was harassing me. I wasn't going to put my health on the line for a job at a gas station. In my last couple of weeks, they switched me in between 2 other different sites, so Tom wouldn't know where I was, and to get away from my regular co-workers. My main site at that time was amazing. The co-workers were supportive and super friendly. The site leader was sympathetic, and even on more than one occasion warned me when he was approaching the store, got me into the back room on time, and then went off at Tom for looking at me, telling him to leave and that he was calling the police, etc. I forgot to mention that when I was placed in other sites, he would drive to each site every day to ask where I was. Someone from my old site told him. I still don't know who it was or why they would do a thing like that, even if they disliked me. But that's how he found out where I was and would come in. Thankfully, I only worked there for a couple more weeks, and most of the people were proactive in keeping him away from me. After I left the job, I decided I wanted to start going to the same church my dad goes to. He swore by the church. So I read some reviews and literally found a review by Tom that was very recent, saying the church was great. I decided to tell Dad about Tom and said I was too scared to go to the church. Dad said Tom was harmless and he had Asperger's, and didn't mean to be weird about stuff. I told Dad that he would wait for me late at night in dark areas beside my work. He would follow me between workplaces. One time I worked half a day at Site 1, and then drove to Site 2 for the other half of my shift, and he was driving behind me. He made comments about how I looked and how I was just such an amazing person countless times, that it just became tiresome and creepy. Dad ended up speaking to the pastor, and pastor told him that he had actually been banned from the church a few days ago for inappropriately hugging the women there. His wife actually came into the church to complain. She did the same thing at my workplace, saying he was innocent and hadn't done anything wrong. I don't know if she's stupid or in denial. Anyway, I moved cities away from where I used to live, and I am very thankful that Tom never found out where I lived or hurt me in any way. I look back in those times where he waited for me in the car park at 10 p.m. and literally shudder at the thought. So Tom, let's not ever meet again. I'm doing great without you. 2. So this story starts with me moving from my parents' home, living on my own for the first time. I was 23 back then. I was super shy, but I soon found a good friend in my neighbor. She once wanted me to come with her in a pub for some drinks and some dancing around, and to meet her so-called friends. I wasn't into this whole party thing, and I felt really uncomfortable, but she pushed me to open up a little, and what should I say? It took a hell of a while, but after a few months I was even able to go out into pubs on my own. Still kinda anxious, but I could ignore it, and have some nice hours with different people, who I got to know over time. Well, there was this guy, way older than me. I'll call him Brian here. He was a nice, polite dude and all that, but I have to admit that I didn't really like him that much. So someone told me that he's interested in me and he wants my number. I was like, oh, no, I'm out. I haven't talked to him much since then. I always got anxious as soon as someone liked me, and as mentioned, he was way too old for my taste anyways. After a while, he hasn't shown up much anymore, so I soon forget about him. Till one day, it was a Saturday night, and I was talking to someone in the back room of the pub. As we finished our chit-chat, we both went out and I headed to my former friends. We are not friends anymore, but that's another story. I just took like 3 or 4 steps, and suddenly a woman came towards me and wrapped her arm around my shoulders. I never saw her before, and was a little confused. She said, "Hey there, how are ya?" I said, "Fine, I guess. Do I know you?" She just told me that she doesn't know if I know her, but that she wanted to know if I asked her man if he wanted to dance with me. You know, I never dance. I mean, I opened up to others a lot, but I would never run around and ask people for a dance. Whatever. I told her that I haven't asked her man for a dance because I never do so. And I don't even know who her man was. She was like, "Sure you did, he told me." And I was like, WTF is happening, man? Her so-called man suddenly popped up and asked what was wrong, and surprise, it was Brian. She shoved me towards him and asked, "Is this her?" He looked confused. "You told me a girl with black and white hair asked you for a dance." I had a split tie back then. He denied that he said that, and they broke out in a fight. I left the scene because my anxiety kicked in, and I was really afraid of her. She had that crazy eyes, if you know what I mean. So time went on, and I haven't seen her in a while. I dyed my hair back to brown at this time. One evening I saw her again with Brian. I was with one of my former friends there, and they came to us. She was really friendly, though. I thought, okay, maybe she was drunk last time. But then I instantly thought, or she doesn't recognize me because I changed my hair color. But, she knew exactly who I was. Brian went to the toilets, and that was the moment where she asked me if she could talk to me. I was a little nervous, but said yes anyway. We went to the back room and she asked me if I had ever had something romantically with Brian. I said no. She instantly flipped and yelled at me that I shouldn't lie to her because she knows. She can see it in the way we look at each other. I was like, what? No. But she didn't believe me. And always, seriously always had her eyes on me. After that evening, every time we were in that pub too, she literally observed my every move. She always yelled at me that I should stop looking at her man and all kind of stuff, even if I wasn't looking at him but at someone else, who happened to stand in his area. But she didn't even yell only at me, but also at Brian. Everyone could hear her screaming, "Stop looking at her!" Or, "I know you're looking at her butt!" One day she even told me to stop wearing dresses. She was 100% sure that I dressed sexy on purpose, so Brian would look at me. I dress fucking normal. What the... It was midsummer, so what's wrong with the dress? One day it even went so far that she screamed through the whole pub, "I swear, you bitch, stop looking at him, I can see you. I'm gonna punch the freaking shit out of you, I'm gonna kill you." Brian never said anything, like a coward. But I kinda understood because I knew she already punched him now and then. After she threatened me with the words, "I'm going to kill you," I just grabbed my stuff and fled. Everyone heard it, but no one said anything. I felt lonely in that situation, and I cried my eyes out on the way home. I never dared go into this pub again. After that, I was even too anxious to go out alone for a few weeks. After all that, someone told me that she snapped again. After a few days, gave him a black eye. I also found out later from a friend of Brian, which I used to know, that she was carrying around a few knives too, all hidden in her jacket, jeans, and even in her boots. All this happened in 10 months, and I still get creeps by just thinking about her. Since last year I have never seen her again, and whatever happened to her, I hope that I never meet her again. 3. I am a nanny, and had been with my current family for about 2 years when the oldest started preschool a couple of days a week. I'd drop him off around 9 and pick him up at 12:30, bringing his baby brother along. Now this school was very hoity-toity, and most of the families who sent their children were very wealthy. Everyone entering the building had to wear badges with their names printed out. Every entrance had a security guard and metal detector. They employed about 10 security guards around the building that patrolled the place from open till close. I became very familiar with several of them because I'd passed them at their posts on the way in and out. Most were cops making a few extra $100 on their days off. Well, during the fall of 2017, the older boy moved to a new class on the other side of the school. This entrance was never as populated, so it was just a couple of people going in and out of this door during the day. The security guard was from a private company. He was always extremely polite and friendly. One of the nicer security guards, without a doubt. He was probably in his late 20s. I thought he looked like a young Santa Claus. Round, jolly face with a permanently red nose and cheeks, framed by a thick brown beard. Thin framed glasses and curly brown hair that went to about his shoulders. I eventually learned that his name was Nick, which only solidified my comparison. Months pass, and we see each other 2 or 3 days a week. The boys loved to wave to him, as he'd always ask how our day was, and we'd respond. In January of 2018, I came down with the flu and missed about 2 weeks of work. When I returned, I continued our regular schedule of school drop-offs and pickups. I was walking past Nick, waved, and he stopped me and said he noticed I was gone for 2 weeks, and he hoped I was feeling better. I smiled, thanked him, and said it was the sickest I had been, but I was glad to be back. I found it a bit odd that he noticed, and that he knew I was sick. I assumed my employers had told him when they did the drop-offs and pick-ups while I was gone. I didn't think much of it and continued on. But when I went to leave, he stopped me again and told me he didn't know that I wasn't the boy's mother. I laughed and basically said people confuse me for their mom because I'm with them all the time, and we kind of look similar. He laughed too, and then said,
"I was wondering. I never saw you with a husband and you don't have a ring on your finger, so I thought you were just a single mom."
I laughed nervously to this, and didn't know what to say, so I said, "Nope, just the nanny." I wanted to kick myself once I got back into the car. I was caught off guard and I'm generally a bit awkward, so tend not to respond best when put on the spot. I guess I didn't realize he paid that much attention to me. I was a bit uneasy but found it harmless. The next drop-off day I said hello and he responded by calling me by name, which he had never done before, and telling me I looked nice, which he had definitely never done before, and I was very surprised. I started to think maybe he was interested in me, since learning that I'm not actually a single mom. This was weird for me. I'm gay, and I look very gay, so men seldom take an interest in me, so when they do, I'm weirded out. When I left, we exchanged a simple goodbye, and the rest of the week was pretty uneventful. In early February, I was doing the drop-off yet again. When on the way out with a baby strapped to my chest, Nick stopped me. He was very courteous, but he asked me if I'd be interested in going to dinner with him some weekend. Again, I'm incredibly awkward, so my response was to laugh, and I could see he was immediately offended. I apologized and tried to explain that I was actually engaged and had been in a long-term relationship. This was true. His face changed and he said,
"Well, where's your ring?"
The way he said this made me uncomfortable. I felt accused and defensive. I told him I don't really like wearing jewelry to work, so only wear it on the weekends. I had accidentally scratched the baby with the ring when he was just a newborn, and basically decided it wasn't something I'd wear when caring for them. He didn't seem satisfied with my answer, but let me go, and told me to have a good evening. When I came back to pick the older boy up that afternoon, Nick seemed agitated. I said hello and no answer. Okay, I was upset but let it go. I didn't want to hurt this guy's feelings, but jeez, could he not tell I was gay? The constant button-ups didn't clue him in. Did I need an undercut? It wasn't personal. Why was he so angry? When I left again, he ignored me. I just kind of swallowed and thought, oh well, he'll get over it. I had put the baby in his seat in the back of my car and was buckling up the 3-year-old when a voice behind me boomed,
"You don't have to lie to me."
I whipped around and Nick was about a foot away from me. I was grabbed between the car, the open door, and his body. He no longer looked like this jolly, polite young man. He was big, probably about 6'2", and easily 400 pounds. I was scared and I was angry. How dare he come up to me and scare me? How dare he corner me and intimidate me when he knows I'm doing my job? I hurried out of the doorway and shut the door and locked it with the keys in my hand. I stood inches away and tried to back up.
"You didn't need to lie to me. If you aren't interested in me, just tell me. I don't like liars."
I didn't know this guy anything, but explained that I wasn't lying. I said I'm engaged and it's nothing personal. He was a nice, friendly guy, and that I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. He was angry. He huffed and said, "Oh, you didn't hurt my feelings. I just don't appreciate dishonesty. You lied about being their mother, so I figured you're lying about this too." I was mad. I never once lied about being their mother. He assumed because I was the one doing drop-offs and pickups. Our conversations never got beyond hello, good day, and goodbye until recently. I decided this conversation was over. He was talking down to me and accusing me of nonsense. I told him I never lied about this or anything, and didn't appreciate his tone. I went around and got in the car, and he followed, but kept his distance and said, "I'm not even sure why I wasted my time on you anyways." I was shocked. He was a completely different person. I avoid altercations at all costs, so for someone to speak to me like this was very upsetting. I ended up disclosing the situation to my employers, who got very upset. They did not like how he spoke to me, and especially didn't like this was done around their children. They ended up contacting the school, which I was mortified about. I was terrified to see him again, knowing he'd know I had told. That never happened. He was fired and replaced with a retired cop who was incredibly unfriendly, and I was grateful. I felt bad. I thought my employers had overreacted, but they were prone to overreactions, and honestly I was selfishly happy I wouldn't have to see him again. I was worried about how awkward it may be. I let it go and weeks passed and school drop-offs were uneventful. However, in May of 2018 that changed. I live in an enclosed apartment complex in uptown Dallas. Our apartment neighbors a ton of bars, so we have some issues with break-ins and vandalism. We've always had police presence, but after an incident where some drunk guy broke into the office through a window, the office manager decided to hire security guards. Guess who ended up doing night shifts? Nick. When I first saw him, I was checking my mail and he passed me in his uniform. I froze and he looked me in the eye and said, "Good evening, ma'am." Good, he must have forgotten me. I was shaking as I went up to my apartment and immediately told my fiancée who I saw. She was aware of the situation with Nick at the old preschool, and being the daughter of a cop was always more suspicious and suspected the absolute worst out of everyone. She did not want him to find out which apartment was ours, so we started taking the back elevator and parking in a different area. He only patrolled the office area, the perimeter of the building, so we found it easy to avoid him for a week or so. One day the back elevator was out of order, so I had to take the front elevator from the parking garage up to my apartment on the 4th floor. The elevator stopped in the lobby, and Nick walks on, and I freeze. I guess he could sense I was anxious. He looked at me and said, "Don't worry, I'm not mad you got me fired. Just don't do it again." I didn't even respond. I got off on the 4th floor and then thought, shit, now he knows which floor I live on. I immediately ran inside and told my fiancée, and she said we should contact the management. I convinced her this was a bad idea. It could make him angry, and I doubt he'd be let go. He hasn't done anything. But did he follow me here? He knew me. How did he end up here? It seemed like too much of a coincidence. I will say we lived in panic. We kept our door bolted and installed a camera. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the story of Jennifer Morey. She was a young lawyer living alone in an apartment similar to mine in Houston. She was stalked and attacked by her apartment security guard. He had access to her apartment. She survived, but went through a horrible ordeal, and we were both terrified this could happen to us. Every noise terrified us. We'd get up to make sure the door was bolted several times before we could go to bed. That summer, we were convinced he'd try to do something. Maybe just our overactive, worried minds. We ended up avoiding him for the most part. We saw him occasionally, but he didn't seem interested, and although we were always weary, we figured he got over it and let our guards down. And he never did bother me again. He never said much of anything to me when I did see him. I decided that maybe he was having a really hard time last fall, and he was really a nice guy who maybe didn't have the best social skills. Fall 2018 rolls around, and I'm busy with work, and my fiancée is out of town often on business meetings. One weekend I'm home alone, and it's 3:30 p.m., and I'm walking down to the office to get a package. There are about 3 squad cars and police all over the lobby and going up the stairs. I'm wondering what happened. But like I said, we live next to bars, and we've had incidents with drunk assholes, so figure someone had an altercation or something got stolen. I try to eavesdrop, but don't hear much. I go about my day and then receive an email from my apartment complex saying they have a community-wide meeting scheduled to discuss the incident and go over resident safety concerns. I'm wondering what the hell happened, so of course I go to the meeting, and guess what? A young single girl living in an apartment by herself showed up mid-afternoon to find Nick inside her apartment. She came in and her drawers were in disarray. He was hiding in her closet and came up with some excuse. The security guards do not have keys to any apartment, and aren't supposed to be in the resident halls. Later, we find out he has been stalking this girl and stole keys from maintenance and made copies. This has been going on for at least a month, if not longer. They found several of her belongings in his vehicle, and he was obviously fired and charged. I didn't follow exactly what happened to him, but we assume he did some time. It was absolutely terrifying, and of course our apartment complex got the pantsuit out of them. I was glad his attention shifted, but wonder what could have happened to this girl. But this wasn't the last time I saw or heard of him. A few weeks ago, over a year since I last saw him, I went into this big fancy mall in my city, and guess who was working security? Nick. My first thought was, you've got to be kidding me! My second thought was, how on earth does this guy keep getting security jobs? Who is dropping the ball here? I saw him and turned around and walked right out the door. Thankfully, I'm moving out of state next month. So Nick, the creepy stalker security guard, let's not meet again. Edit to add, many have asked if I know which security he worked for at any point. I don't know. I do remember the one he wore at the apartment complex was tan and had red lettering in the back that said security. I don't remember a company name on his uniform. I would also like to add that I don't remember him ever carrying a gun. I double-checked with my fiancé, and he did not wear a gun, or at least not visibly, while working at our apartment complex. I also noticed at the preschool that security guards were not armed. The cops are armed, but the security guards are not armed. I'm not sure if they're armed at the mall. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 442. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I think I've forgotten how to talk. Yep. Hopefully I remember by the time I need to make the next video. That would be a useful skill to have. I'm currently recording this at 4:04 in the morning. And my brain is saying, you should totally go and make a nice hot cup of coffee. You have yummy biscuits to have with it. Go on, you know you want to. And I may. Or I should probably just make tea. Make my fancy tea instead. Well, gonna head off for now and have that coffee debate with myself, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.